So just bear in mind that it is being recorded. So consider this to be like a public room, as if you were attending in person in like in a hotel or something like that.
Alastair,
So
if I could just say, if you don't mind, if you just send me your attendee list and the live link, the link for the recording, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks very much.
will do. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers, Jeremy.
Bye.
Okay, so we're gonna cover today. There's Jeremy's tips that he's just gone through. So we will be covering those, but I'll go through them quickly because we've already got most of the detail from Jeremy on that. The agenda for today, the first part is the attendance required section, and that's the initial presentation, which is about the voucher scheme. And I'm going to show you, going to talk to you about the voucher itself. At the end of that, I'm going to ask you to sign in, and that's important. I just want to make sure I get your sign in because I'll send that on to Jeremy like he asked. The second part is entirely optional to stay for. You might find it useful. A lot of people do stay for that, and that is the online marketing training workshop. That's effectively what it is. And the goal of this part is to help you get the most out of the voucher so that you get the most bang for your buck with your money. So first part is required, second part is entirely optional. You're welcome to leave at any point during that. But I'll show you at the end of the first section, I'll show you what's actually going to come up in that second part so you get an idea. So just give you some idea of my background. I've been in business since 2007. My business called Website Doctor. I'm a mentor with several of the LEOs. I've been working on these vouchers now since 2014, since it started. I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you are if you're on social media and you're on LinkedIn, please do connect with me. I'm big into podcasting. I have 4 or 5 of my own podcasts now at this point. The Recognized Authority is the flagship. I've got 150 episodes of that. And I've also written a few books about content creation. So you can find me on Amazon if you look up my name. Okay, so this presentation is an overview of the scheme, what you can use it for, and some tips to make sure that you are successful. Jeremy has already given you a lot of that stuff, which is really great. One thing I just want to mention, there's a lot of people sending unsolicited messages these days, from fake messages about, your bank account, or you paying for antivirus that you didn't buy, or toll roads, or you've got a package being delivered that you've got to pay customs on. If you get contacted by anybody, by any web design company, or literally anybody that you haven't reached out to yourself, I strongly recommend that you ignore those messages. You don't reach out to them, you don't work with them. So just if you do get unsolicited messages from anybody, including web design companies, please do ignore those. Okay, so financial support of 2,500 euros. That's what this is effectively. It's up to 2,500 euros and it's matching. So they will match the amount that you put forward. It's very wide in scope. That's the cool thing about this. So it can be used for multiple different, it can be used for multiple different services. So this is the cool part where you can use it to get, let's say, some work done on your website, plus a photography session, plus a training course, for example, right? And there's multiple services that you can use, and we'll go through what's eligible, what's not. But that's the really cool thing about this, is that it can be used for multiple different things at the same time. There were a lot of changes around the time of the pandemic. They changed the rate of the TOVS temporarily to 90%. It's back at 50% matching since 3 years ago now. And they also changed it so if you had applied previously, that you were eligible to apply a second time, so 2 maximum in the lifetime of the business. It also covers some recurring subscriptions for what they call low-cost e-commerce services, and they're also strictly excluding certain businesses, and we have a list of what those are. It's matched at 50% of the ex-VAT amount of the quote, up to 2,500 euro cap for almost all spend. There are some exceptions, and those exceptions are online advertising can be a maximum of 30% of the total voucher, and then photography can be 80% of the total voucher maximum. So if you are here, you're probably eligible. It's for regular for-profit businesses with a limited online trading presence. You can't be Amazon.com already. And you have to have less than 11 employees and less than 2 million turnover. You also must be trading for at least 6 months. So that's all of the kind of the eligibility requirements for you as a business. And if you are outside, if you're larger than the 11 employees, 2 million turnover, then you may need to talk to Enterprise Ireland, who run a similar scheme. And then if you are not trading for at least 6 months, then you need to be at that point. There is a little bit of leeway. One of the things that's interesting about this scheme is the rules of the scheme are given by the Department of Communications and Enterprise who administer the scheme. But the local enterprise offices in each area, they're the ones who actually administer the scheme locally. And they have a little bit of leeway and interpretation as to how they interpret things. And so I know, for example, that Jeremy is very strict in Roscommon, and Roscommon are very strict about the 6 months thing. Whereas I know that in Mayo, there's a little bit more leeway. And in Mayo, they interpret that slightly differently so that if the project is finished by the time you're at 6 months, then you'd be eligible. So there are some slight differences from how this is administered and interpreted, how the rules are interpreted from county to county, from Leo to Leo. But for the most part, it's exactly like Jeremy said. So if sometimes there are very, very minor differences, you'll see. You've got to apply to the Leo that's closest to you, that in the region that you're in. And then most small businesses are eligible. Things that are not eligible are clubs, charities, not-for-profits, associations, semi-states, conferences, and seminars. Basically, things that aren't small businesses. And then they also don't want to duplicate some EU funding. So they ask some questions about that in the application form, and then those limits that we talked about earlier, the turnover employees in 6 months. Now, they do have this list of businesses that are not eligible, and I'm going to go through that, and there's 5 pages of this, like this. I do have a list available for download. You can also contact the local enterprise office if you think you might be on this list. What you'll notice here is that there's a 4-digit number here, and that's a NACE code. And that basically represents the type of business or the type of organization that you might have. And every business has a NACE code associated with it. It's the area of operations, effectively. And so these are ones that are excluded from, not that are not eligible for the voucher scheme. Now, what you'll notice is that most of these are actually covering things that we just went through over here. So, for example, semi-states, clubs, charities, small businesses are okay. You'll see that these things are typically not small businesses. So they talk here about manufacturing of electronics and communications and things like that, wholesale and retail of electronics. And then they have some down here, passenger, air transport, freight, air transport, and space transport. So clearly not small businesses. And then we have some that here, book publishing, newspaper publishing, computer games, motion pictures, radio broadcasting, TV, satellite, computer consulting and programming. I don't know exactly why these are in here. In fact, I don't know why like the ones that they've chosen are the ones that they've chosen, but this is the list that they've given us. So going through. So if you think you're on this list, talk to the Leo and they can check what your NACE code is. I think it's on your company registration office profile. And I'm also give you an opportunity to download this as well. Then we have banking, central banking, and these clearly are not small businesses, pension insurance, life insurance, buying and selling of own real estate and real estate agencies. So this could be, I guess, a small business, advertising, and then things down here that are administration, like foreign affairs, defense, fire services. They're clearly not small businesses. These ones here either um, these are education, first, second, third level education, libraries, museums, and then activities like trade unions, religious organizations, membership organizations. The only thing I see here that could actually be a small business is driving schools. I don't know why that is excluded here. Maybe it just got lumped in by accident in the whole education section. So those are the businesses that are deemed to be not eligible by the Department of Communication and Enterprise. And I don't know how they chose that list specifically, but we have to administer it the way it is. You can download that list here if you think that you might be on it, you want to check it. You can also ask the local enterprise office to check your business and they will be able to tell you if you're on that list. Okay, that's the worst part of this presentation out of the way. The rest of it is much simpler and less kind of data or detail full. So here's what you can actually use the vouchers for. So this is the official list that they've given us. So it can be used for digital marketing strategy. Now, when they say digital marketing strategy, that is so broad in scope, it can mean almost anything to do with your website marketing. So it can be used for planning or execution of your digital marketing strategy. So extremely broad in scope as to what you can do. Next part is development or upgrade of an e-commerce website. So if you have an e-commerce website and you want to improve it, or you don't have one, you want to get one, it's very, very straightforward. That is clearly covered by this. And then For those who don't have e-commerce and online payments, there's the booking function that Jeremy talked about. And this is particularly important because they're going to be looking for one of two things, either the ability to take an online payment or the ability to have a booking function. So they're going to look for one of those two things when they come down to decide whether you are eligible for the drawdown at the end of the project. Customer fulfillment systems like a print-on-demand website, something like that. Internet related software. So that means that software that is directly related to your website. And so websites these days are actually usually built as a collection of software from different places. And so this would be eligible if there was some piece of software that was required to build out your website, the cost of that could be incorporated in this. It can be used for development of an app or a mobile responsive website. We'll talk a little bit further in the second part about mobile responsive websites, but effectively what that means is mobile friendly websites, and every website should be mobile friendly in 2024. And then development of an app. So this means uh, where you have where you want to create an app for your business. And what I'd say is also check out innovationvouchers.ie because they also fund development of apps. So just check that out as well. Um, okay, so Sean had a question. Does business need to be a limited company? It can be a sole trader. You can absolutely be a sole trader or self-employed. And training is not included on the official list, but it is allowed. I'm certain of that. Training, online training, and in-person training, Carmel. It can be training for anything to do with um your website, search engine optimization, blogging, website management, anything like that. So I don't think it's on the list. We'll see. I think it's been a while since I went through this list. We'll see. I think I'll mention it on this slide if it's on the official list, but it's definitely allowed. Oh, okay. So it's the next slide. Yeah. So training is allowed. And so that can be for you or for your employees. And so you can put several people on a training course if you want to. Then online advertising, and that can be a maximum of 30% of the total. And then photography isn't mentioned on that official list, but we know that it is because they say that photography can be a maximum of 80% of the total. So photography is the one that's not on the list, but is allowed. Okay, so what the vouchers can't be used for. It can't be used for development of brochure websites. And I find their language here is problematic. And they actually realized that because they had to clarify it. Lead generation websites are absolutely fine. So here's what they say about brochure websites. Brochure website is a digital version of a printed brochure that shows products or services, but unlike an e-commerce website, they don't sell the product or service or have an interactive booking function. That's the key phrase in here. So they are looking for e-commerce that sells a product or service, or they're looking for interactive booking. So you have to have one or the other. If you have neither of those, then the resulting website is not eligible for the funding. So you must have either e-commerce or interactive booking. Now, the good news is every web designer in Ireland knows about this, and there's lots of different ways that you can add interactive booking function to your website. So you'll be able to talk to your website designer about that. So purchase of non-internet related software is not eligible. And so what I mean by this is you can't buy Microsoft Office or Adobe Photoshop or something like that. That would not be covered. And then anything that isn't directly related to online trading is not covered. Okay, so notable rules. You've got to attend an informational seminar, which is why you're here and why you had to sign in. It excludes VAT. It originally did cover VAT for 6 months in 2014. And then, so you might see some super old documentation that mentions it, but it definitely does not include VAT. Now, what that means is that if you are not registered for VAT as a business, then there is a minor advantage in you working with a web designer who's also not registered for VAT. And the reason for that is because there'll be no VAT portion on the invoice. The issue here is if you are registered for VAT, then it doesn't matter. The issue here is you need to make sure that if you get a quote from a web designer who's not registered for VAT, they need to state on the quote that they're not registered for VAT, and that's why there's no VAT, because otherwise they'll assume that it's a VAT inclusive figure, or they'll come back to you, they'll be confused and it'll delay your application. So just make sure that you spell out on the quotes, the official quotes that you get from your web designers, that it's spelled out what the VAT status is, because that's important. But like I said, there isn't a minor advantage in that you'll save 23% if you go with a web designer who's also not registered for VAT, which means they're probably a smaller business as well, and that they haven't been, maybe they haven't been trading for a long time. So you have to provide some documentation proving eligibility. We're going to talk through what that is. You're going to need to include 3 quotes for each service where possible. Now, here's an example of this. Let's say you are getting your website redone, you're also getting a photography shoot, and you're also doing a training course. They absolutely have to have 3 quotes for the website part. It would be nice if you have 3 quotes for the photography, and it would be nice if you have 3 quotes for the training, but not strictly required. But you definitely need to have it for the website part, which is probably the major portion of the spend. So just bear that in mind. It's good to have those, and you get to pick who you want to work with. It doesn't matter if they're the most expensive. You don't have to work with the cheapest or anything like that. Some things to help them process the application quicker. List your quotes in your order of preference. Make sure the prices are ex VAT. Make sure it's spelled out on the invoice, sorry, on the quote, if it's ex VAT or not. And then you've got to provide some documentation showing the supplier is eligible. So your supplier must be a registered business. They don't have to be based in Ireland, but they must be registered as a business wherever they're based. They have to be tax compliant in their area. So companies in Ireland can all show that they're tax compliant through the revenue website. And I'm sure it's the same in other areas as well, but they just need to be able to show they're a registered business and they're tax compliant. The project must take less than 6 months. This is a number that has changed many times. So it's been 4 months and it's been 9 months. So 6 months is plenty of time to build a website, and 4 months is even plenty of time to build a website. Just be aware that there is a clock and it is ticking. They will give you 1 month extra in what they call extenuating circumstances, but any longer than that, and your application will be decommitted, which means they'll just take you off the system and you won't be eligible, and you'll have to go through the whole process again. So just be aware there is a clock. It's plenty of time. 6 months is plenty of time to get to build a website. Most important slide in the whole presentation is do not spend any money until you receive the formal letter of offer. So they will send you a formal offer, and there's going to be a date on that. And whatever date that's on that is the date from which you can spend. Any spend that you make before that is not covered, so it won't be matched. So that's why this is super important, is just make sure you don't spend the money till you get the formal offer. So the way this works is you spend the money up front, and at the end of the project, at the drawdown phase, that's when they will basically refund you the 50% matching up to 2,500 euros. And what they require at that stage, they need to see the original invoices for the work. They need to see a bank statement showing proof of payment to the supplier. Now, just on that, they don't need to see your bank balance. They don't need to see the other transactions, but they do need to see the payment in the correct amount going to the correct supplier's name. Now, on that, the other thing to mention is if you pay by cash or if you pay by check, it probably won't show the supplier's name on there. So you're better off making some sort of electronic or card payment that shows who the supplier is on your bank statement. Tax clearance verification for your business. So they're looking for your tax clearance information, which you can get from your accountant or yourself through the revenue website. And then they're looking for your CRO registration or some other kind of proof that you've been trading for over 6 months. They're looking for a summary of the work done and anticipated benefits to your business. So this is like a 1 or 2 line email to them saying, hey, we got the website redone, here it is, and here's how we think it's going to help. And then they're looking for an email from your supplier to say, yeah, the website has been redone, and here's the address, and yeah, the project is complete. And that's effectively just like a sign off to say it's done. They're looking for your supplier business details that we already mentioned those, the name, address, registration number, things like that for the supplier. And then what else they're going to ask you in your application? They're going to ask you all of your business details. So just double check and make sure they're all correct. That we've seen it delayed because of an incorrect email address or phone number with digits transposed or something like that. So just make sure those are all correct. Tell them specifically how it's going to help your business. So they're going to ask you how it helps, and is it going to help you do sales automatically online? Is it going to help you generate new leads? Is it going to help you do better customer service? Maybe by having videos of how to use your products or something like that online. So they're asking you these as a prompter question. A lot of the questions in this are kind of prompter type questions like that. So what I mean by that is it's they're trying to get you to give them answers so that you think through things. So here's one is they ask you who your online competitors are. And the reason why they want you to do that is they want you to go and see who your competitors are. So that's why they ask for that. They want to know who your target market is because they want to know that you know who your target market is. And they want to know how it's going to grow your revenue or increase efficiencies. So how is it going to make you money or save you money? Another prompter question, and this one is a bit more how would I put it? This one is not as obvious for some folks as to what they can do with it, but there might be some resources. Like, let's say you've got some member of staff who has built a website before or is great at social media. You might be able to put them on this project. They're asking, are there any facilities, people, or anything that might be useful for the project? If this doesn't feel like it makes sense to you, you can put in NA for not applicable on any of these. Just don't leave it completely blank. But if you feel like this isn't relevant for you, you can put in NA. They're also asking, are there any existing digital assets that might be able to help? So did you get some photos or videos or animations? Are there any presentations or software or even written content that you might be able to use? Now, one example I've seen of this was where somebody had some newsletters that they'd been sending out over the years that were kind of evergreen content, and they were able to turn that into written content for their website as blog posts. So there might be something that you have. If you're not sure, put in NA for not applicable. So tips for filling in your application. First is make it easy for them to fund you. Include everything that they ask for. If they ask for something and you don't provide it, they're just going to look for it and then come back to you and ask for you for it again. So if there's something that they ask for, they genuinely need it. And so they're going to just keep coming back until they get it from you, or the project will get delayed. So just make it easy for them by giving them everything that they need. Make sure you have 3 quotes in order of preference, and that the prices that you listed are ex-VAT. Contact at the Leo, like Jeremy, for the folks in Roscommon, for anything that you're unclear about, any questions that you have. So that's the end of the initial presentation. Can I ask you to sign in? So you can put in your personal name and your business name in the chat, and that's the text chat. And I'll just, I think some folks are already, so you can put it in there. You can send it to everybody, or you can click on the drop down and just send it to me if you want, just for your own privacy. But it would be good to get your sign in. Now, what I'm going to do is, let me pull up my screen again. I'm just going to show you very briefly what I'm going to go through the next part of the session. I'm going to go through some website mistakes that I've seen over the years and how to deal with those. I'm going to show you a website checklist that I have, and that'll be relevant after watching the first one. I'm going to talk to you about how to choose the right web design company. So we'll talk about that. And then I'm also going to talk to you about how to get traffic to your website, how to get people to visit your website, which is super important after you build a shiny new website and you're sitting there and you're looking at it and all you hear is crickets because nobody's visiting your website. So how do you do that? How do you get people to visit your website? And we'll talk about where that traffic will come from. So that's what we're going to do next. So before that, we can do a quick Q&A if you have any questions for me on anything that we've done so far. So what questions do you have for me on anything that we've talked about?
Oh yeah, sorry, quick one. Roughly, how long would the whole process take once you actually give the application? Let's say it's all good and it's all full and everything. How long would it take to answer? And
last time I checked in Mayo, and I think you're in Westport. Last time I
yes.
checked in Mayo, the turnaround was about 2 weeks.
All
So
right. Okay.
I would say it could be as little as 3 or 4 days. when you're really lucky.
Okay.
In fact, when I was doing evaluations in Mayo, and we were actually turning around
Yeah.
applications in 1 hour at one point.
Oh wow. And then
So
did you not
that was
have
just
another meeting with them?
that will just depend if you're lucky, if the right person is in at the right time. But I
Okay.
would say if you give yourself a rule of thumb of 2 weeks, I'd say that should be fine.
To get the
just
official letter, is it?
yeah, and that comes
Okay.
through email as well. So there's no there's no postage delay there.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
But yeah, so it really does depend on, because there's a certain person in each Leo who's authorized to sign off on these, and that person has to be available, maybe not necessarily physically in the office, but they need to be
Okay.
available to go through and evaluate these forms. But yeah, if you have everything ready to go and it's a no-brainer for them to approve it, yeah, it can sometimes be super quick.
Brilliant.
And it just
Do,
depends.
do you need to meet with someone again? I think I remember that having a one-on-one. Maybe that was just because it was lockdown and stuff.
Sometimes it depends on the Leo. Again, each Leo
Okay.
operates this very slightly differently because they all interpret the rules and everything themselves slightly differently. But
Okay.
for Roscommon, I don't think you have to, and I don't think when Mayo does meetings either.
Okay.
So they should just take your application once you've sent it in, and so the way it works is after, because I'm going to give Jeremy the sign in sheets from here, and after I send that in, um he's going to then send an email to Mayo to say that you attended, and so
Yeah.
then they know that you've attended. And then when you send in your application form, sorry, so I know that Jeremy will then send out the application forms to everybody from Roscommon. Mayo will send
Okay.
you out the application form as well. So that's the way it'll
Yes.
work.
Yes. That's right.
So,
Yeah. Perfect. That makes sense. Thanks so
and
much.
follow up with them if I don't know, is it
If I
Pamela
don't hear.
Barrett in the
Yeah.
Leo?
Yes. That's right. Yes.
Follow up
Yeah.
with them anyway and ask them to send on the application form if they haven't already. Just say that you
That's great.
did a seminar with. If you tell them my name, they'll know that you did it
Yes.
because I do seminars for them as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about next is website mistakes that I've seen over the years that people make. And number one sin in website development is a website that's confusing. So your website should not confuse people when they arrive there. So my favorite book about web design is called Don't Make Me Think. And so your website shouldn't force people to have to figure things out. It should be really obvious when people look at your website. It should be really obvious how it works and where to find the things that they're looking for. So they shouldn't have to kind of puzzle around and figure out. It should be intuitive. Bear in mind that everybody is listening to WeFM. So even everybody on this call today, WeFM is what's in it for me. So everybody looking at your website, they don't care about your business. They care about the problem that they have that they want to solve. So they are looking at your website thinking, what's in this for me? Where's the thing that I'm looking for? So bear that in mind, that you need to look at your website when you're creating it through the point of view or through the perspective of your visitor who's looking to solve the problem that they have. One thing that you can do is use a large headline explaining what the website is about. So I like this format. We help these people solve this problem, or we help these people get this result. And so if you put this on your homepage, front and center, when people arrive on your website and it says, we help these people solve this problem, then if they're in that group of people and they have that problem, they know they're in the right place. And so this kind of positioning statement is really useful, particularly if you have a service type business. If you have a product business, if you sell, shoes, or you sell something physical, you can put a picture of your product up. But when you have a service, it's not as obvious to people what you do. And there's usually some nuance around service businesses. And so it's good to explain it, to literally spell out who you help. Next thing is a strong, clear call to action. So a call to action is a clear next step for somebody to follow. And you've all seen these 1,000 times a day. Next step, call to action buttons. So these are buttons that look clickable and they'll stand out on the page. And the color should contrast against the page design. So it should stand out. And here's an example from Amazon. And this is an incredibly busy page. It's for that book I mentioned earlier, Don't Make Me Think. This is an incredibly busy page with about 1,000 things that you can click on here. But there's two really dominant calls to action here. And the primary one is the add to basket button. So it's this big orange button in kind of this middle of sea of white, mostly white down here. And it stands out against that section. And then the other call to action that's quite dominant here is this big search box in the middle center of the top. And the reason why that's important is because the primary call to action is how Amazon make all their money on this page. People visiting a product and then adding it to basket and going through with the purchase process. But if this isn't the right product for you, then very few people are going to go over here and click shop by department. Most people are going to just search for what they're looking for, and they're going to use that secondary call to action, that secondary navigation to get around. And so those are super important. Even though there's so many things here on this page that you can click on, the top right, start your 6-month trial. On the book cover, there's look inside. On the logo, there's Try Prime. There's the Kindle edition. There's all of these different things that you can click on here. Yet it's the primary and the secondary calls to action that stand out really dominantly. And so think about that on your website. Amazon has spent millions on testing the design of these pages, by the way, to make sure that these pages are effective and efficient and convert the highest. And this is what they've created. So this isn't beautiful by any means, but it is incredibly effective. So just bear that in mind. It's not necessarily about beauty, but more about effectiveness in terms of
Alistair,
the call to action.
sorry for interrupting.
Go ahead.
So is that type of page on Amazon, like anytime I go onto Amazon, I just think there's so much going on the page. I find it off-putting, but that's actually tried and tested that's
they've
effective.
They've literally spent millions, yeah, on testing this.
Oh, because I think there's so much going on in it. It's just like, geez,
there is, but what happens is we tend to skip over the human brain and the way their eyes and our brains, we tend to skip over stuff that isn't relevant for us. When we're looking for something specific, our eyes will jump to it. Our subconscious mind is skipping over all the things that aren't important and are pulling out what is.
Right.
And so we'll look for the things that we're looking for. So if you know you want to buy this book, but you want to get it when it's on sale, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to immediately look for the price. If you want to buy this book and you want to get it delivered really quickly, you're going to check for the delivery time. So it's going to depend on what's super important for you. But all of this kind of extraneous information isn't relevant for most people. Your eyes just gloss over it and just go to what you want.
Okay, so it's designed like that there's an option there for nearly every audience.
Yeah, but the eyes are drawn to the things that stand out. So let me see. So like these different call to action buttons, each of those will stand out in different places. Your eye will look for that. So that's why it's really important to use a button in particular, because you can have text links as well, and people will click on text links, but buttons stand out more.
Okay, thank you.
So every page should have a call to action. The call to action is a clear next step. So the next step might be different from page to page because the next step is different, but you should always have a call to action. So next thing is websites that don't have a good design aesthetic. So design is something that is super subjective, but there are some basic principles that will still apply. My best advice here is get a professional to help you with the design elements. And make sure that your web design is consistent with your brand. So if you have a business card or a brochure or a leaflet or a van on the road with a wrap, all of those things should have the same colors and fonts and visual identity as your web design. So, and if you don't have that, now is a good time to get it because you're getting that funded to get that created for you. Next thing is responsiveness. And responsive simply means the website responds to the screen size that it's being displayed on to show correctly. And typically that's going to mean mobile friendly, but it also means it works on, like if it's on a big TV or something like that, that it'll work on whatever size device it's on. Like if it's on a tablet versus a tablet turned into landscape mode, whatever, that it's just as responsive and works. The issue here is that around 60 to 70% of all traffic is on mobile on websites. Some is going to be less and some is going to be more. So for example, if you do financial software for banks, then maybe most of your traffic is on desktop. But if you sell pizza, then maybe most of your traffic is people sitting on their couch ordering from their mobile phone. And so most of your traffic is going to be on mobile. So it's really going to depend. But more so, it tends that in the consumer space, you're going to get more traffic on mobile because more people have phones than have laptops, for example, or desktops. Next thing is the About page. The reason the About page is important is it's typically the second most visited page on a website. And that is when you have you've got your homepage, which is the most visited page because it's the page where everybody goes first if they arrive on the website or if people go to the homepage to check you out. The About page is actually the page where people go to see if they can trust you. So who is this? How can we trust them? Can we trust them to fix the brakes on our car or mind our kids for 6 hours? Or can we trust them to provide a good experience if we book into their hotel? Or can we trust them to come into our house and do some work on the house without knocking down the ceiling? Or come into our house and do some work and don't leave a mess behind afterwards. So what can we do to get people to build trust with people? So that's why they go to the About page, see can they trust you. Now, one thing that you can do to build trust is to have photos of people, names, short bios, talk about why you serve your particular customers, give them a backstory of the business. All of these are things that make a connection with people. So what you're doing is you're helping them to understand more about who you are, see that you're real people, that you're a real business. You can also include street address, photos, telephone number. All of these things show that you're a real business. Next thing is website speed. So your website should load fast. Website visitors are very impatient. So my rule of thumb is 4 seconds or less. And this number has come down from 8 seconds about 10 years ago. So now if you imagine somebody clicks on a link on Google, and so they get to the search results and they click. You say 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000, 4 1,000. Your website should have loaded. Something should have appeared. If they're still looking at a blank white screen after 4 seconds, there's a good chance they're just going to click back and go to the next one in the list. Now, the issue is Google doesn't like that happening because it's giving people a bad experience. So they're actually going to rank faster sites above you and rank yours down. So just be aware of the of that happening, that your website speed is actually important. One thing that you can do to help with this is you can use smaller images. Now, when I'm talking about smaller images, I'm not talking about the display size. So I want you to imagine that you've got a sponge full of water in your hand and you squeeze the sponge and then you let go. Now the sponge is much lighter, but it's still the same size. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about compressing images and making them smaller. So it's about the amount of data that's in those images, because when you take an image, a photo off of a modern camera or even a modern phone, what happens is the amount of data that's in those images is actually far higher than what we actually need for websites. So just bear that in mind, particularly if you're getting professional photography, that your images may need to be compressed and made smaller. Then the other thing is a thing called caching. I'm not going to go into what that is. It's just a thing that needs to be turned on. And turning on caching can make a website go from loading in 60 seconds to loading in 5 seconds. It can make a huge difference. It's something that your web designer should know about and should be doing. And all of the speed optimization stuff that I'm talking about here needs to be done at the end of the project, just before you go live. That's the last thing they should do before go live is looking at the website speed. Now, the good news about website speed is it's very easy to test it and to check it. And also the tools that test it and check it also tell us what's slowing it down. So you can test your website, or your web designer can test your website. They can see how long it's taking, what's causing the delay. They can go fix those things and then test it again, and then they can see that it's much faster. So I really like speed optimization for that reason, because you can actually just see, okay, this is the problem, let's go sort that out. Last thing I'll say is get good hosting for your website. Now, I've written about this a bit more because it's too much to go into in detail right now. But what I'll say is there's a lot of misinformation about website hosting online. And the reason for that is because it's extremely profitable. So website hosting, it's a numbers game. And so what that means is there's a lot of people online who are giving recommendations for hosting companies that is incentivized by referral commissions. So it's not actually incentivized by them saying, hey, this is actually the best option. This is the option that will give me the most money if I refer you. So just take everything that you read online about website hosting, including from me, take all of it with a grain of salt, because it's there's a lot of kind of misinformation and disingenuous information out there about hosting. So talk to other business owners about website hosting and get some recommendations as well about that. Next thing is email, and we'll talk a bit more about this in the next section. But when your website doesn't have a compelling email opt-in incentive, that's a problem. And the reason for that is because most people who visit your website are going to leave and never come back, right? And this number can change from site to site, but that's pretty typical, 97%. And this is heartbreaking when we see how much effort it takes to get people to visit our website. So what can we do to get people to come back to our website? A lot of people will have sign up for our free email newsletter. The problem with that is it's not a good incentive, because what you're saying is we want to send you an email newsletter, and newsletter means news and typically means company news. And so what that sounds like to a lot of people is we want to spam you on a regular basis. There's no offer of value in that. And so what can you do? Well, you can offer something different. Offer something that is actually a free resource. A friend of mine calls this a gift with a logo. So offer them something that helps them. Now, if you remember, we talked about, we helped these people solve this problem earlier on in terms of positioning statements. So actually help them to solve the problem, or help them to chunk off a small piece of the problem and help them solve that part. So create something that helps the visitor solve the problem that they're facing, and make it quick to consume but genuinely valuable. And this is really key as well, because if you make something too big, what they'll do is they'll say, oh, that looks really good, I'll look at that later, I'll save it to my hard drive. And then they never look at it again. But if you make it something that's quick to consume but genuinely valuable, they can use it then and there, and it can be genuinely useful for them. So make it quick to consume and genuinely valuable. And then once you get their email address, the important thing is you actually have to continue to email them. Now, the good thing is there's a lot of technology set up for this, and you can set this up to have email autoresponders where you can build trust and credibility with them. So you can send a sequence of one email every day, or one every 3 days, or one every week, whatever your preference is. But what you do is you send them useful information that's actually helping them solve the problem. And you can also make a sales pitch in here. Now, I'd suggest that you don't make it a very hard sales pitch. You can make it a very soft sales pitch. But what you're doing is you're offering to help them, and you're building trust with them as you do, because they're seeing that you're an expert in what you're talking about. And that builds trust and credibility, and that puts you top of mind for them. Last one is your domain is your most important asset, so own it. So I say register your domain yourself. Don't get somebody else to register it for you, even if that's more convenient, because the convenience is outweighed by the fact that you own and control the most important asset for your website. If you own your own domain, and if you have a backup of your website files, then you can move your website anywhere. So that's all you need. So that's why I think it's really important to own your domain yourself. Okay, any questions on any of that we've done so far? Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is I'm just going to show you very briefly. I mentioned a gift with a logo. And so this is one that I created myself, and I call it a website audit checklist. And so this is something that I made available for download on my website in order for people to opt in with their email. And so this is a checklist. And as you can see, there's a cover. Then there's 5 items on this checklist here, another 5, another 5, another 4. So there's 19 items on this checklist. And then at the end, there's a call to action to book an audit call. And so this is something I created this originally about 7 or 8 years ago. And so I created at the time, I created it in Google Slides. But now if I was creating, I'd probably create it in Canva. But so what I do with this is you can go here to download and download a PDF. And that gives you a nice PDF that you can then send to people. And so this would be the incentive for me on my website for people to download. So they get this website audit checklist, and then they would be able to audit their own website. I actually recorded a little video to go along with this for them so that they could go through it, and the video would walk them through each of these items. So that was something I made available for folks who arrived on my website, and the incentive then was they would get this if they opted into my email list. So that's an example of that email opt-in that I talked about. Okay, so yeah. Any questions on anything that we've done so far, including the voucher scheme, the website mistakes, the email incentive, anything that we've talked about at all? Okay, so moving on to choosing the right web design company. So this is super important because what they're doing is they're creating this marketing avatar, this online representation of your business. And in order to do that, they need to understand your business. They need to understand your business model, your business objectives, your goals, and your clients' needs, your customers' needs. So they need to understand your business really well. That's the interesting thing about web design, is they need to understand your business almost as well as you do. And in order to create this representation. So they've got to have the right skills to build a website, to design it. They have to have great communication because they need to be able to, first of all, pull all of that information out of you. And then they also need to be able to create it and put it online. And they also have to give a damn. They have to care. Otherwise, it's very difficult to do something like this. So the way I see web design is it's not just about design, even though we tend to call it web design. Sometimes we call it web development. And there's 3 aspects here. One is the design graphics design element. The other is technology and coding, the kind of the software building blocks. And then underneath all of that, there's the business and marketing side. And this part needs to be brought to the table by somebody. And this is the bit I think that is missing sometimes. Because a lot of, so when we started out with building websites, I started building websites in 1996. And back then, the only people who could build websites were people with technology background, because we literally didn't have the tools to build websites that looked good easily without technical help. And so the technology was the first thing that came along. Then the graphics folks started learning how to use websites, and the techie folks built tools that were better and easier to use. And so then we had the technology and the graphic design part, but we still didn't have a lot of experience in the business side of websites. And that's still, even now, even still evolving. And so this bit came along later. And so what you had is you had a lot of people with technology or graphic skills building websites without business marketing knowledge. And this part took a while to kind of catch up. So you do need all 3 parts of this. Now, when you're talking to a web designer, they're probably going to be really strong on one of these, and maybe they'll have a second one as well. So for example, when I started out, I was strong on the technology coding side. I didn't have the business marketing skills, and I didn't have any kind of graphic design skills either. I have now evolved, so I'm mostly the business marketing side now. I have some techie skills, but I usually hire people for that. And I don't have any actual design skill in terms of creating stuff. So what I do is I hire people for that as well. But whenever you're talking to somebody, they will usually be on one side of this triangle. So it's useful to try and figure out which one of those they are. And usually they'll have somebody else on one of the other sides. And ideally, all 3 of those sides. Now you can work with somebody, if you were particularly strong on the business marketing side, you can work with somebody who has the other 2 and they don't have this part. But if you are not strong on the online marketing part, then you need to make sure that you hire a web designer who is strong on that part as well. So, and all 3 of those skills are needed to create an effective website. So the question I like to ask is, do they specialize? That for me is one of the most important questions. And so I think a perfect fit is somebody who specializes in building websites just for your industry. So if you're a dentist, they say we only build websites for dentists. We don't build websites for anybody else. If you're a restaurant, they say we only build websites for restaurants and cafes. We don't build websites for anybody else. And what that means is they have a total focus on your industry, and that means they'll have a super in-depth understanding of your business and your clients' needs, your customers' needs. A good fit is a generalist who has successful projects in your industry. So they say, well, we build websites for every type of business, but here's 3 websites that we've built for dentists recently, if you're a dentist. Here's 3 websites we've built for B&Bs recently, if you're a B&B. So they're a generalist, but they do have a track record that they can show you. So they do have an understanding of your target, of your market. And then what I consider to be an okay fit is the most common. That's the locally based generalist. So that's somebody who is nearby you and they say, we build websites for everybody. And we haven't built a website for a dentist before, but we have built a website for an accountant. So it's not that much different. And this is true, this kind of approach of, you know, we haven't done specifically that before, but it's not that much different. The issue for me is they don't have this in-depth knowledge. They don't have a track record. They don't have this in-depth knowledge of your industry or your needs. And that means that you are their learning curve. So that's why I'm not keen on this one as much. And then I also am not crazy about picking just based on platform specialization. So if you say, oh, I want a Shopify website, so you look for somebody who's specialized in Shopify, or you say, I want a Magento website, so I want somebody who specializes in building websites with Magento. I think that you're better off looking for an industry or sector type specialization. We build websites for this sector, for companies in this industry. Okay, so my approach to this would be to make a list. So first place I would go is your competitor's website and look for a link at the bottom. If there's no link at the bottom, then maybe call and ask them who built their website. The reason for this is because we know that the company that built their website has a track record of building websites in this industry. And so that's a great place to start. Ask around your network who built their website, who would they recommend? Do they know any other website providers locally? I am a little bit cynical, but if I always check to see if somebody I'm talking to is in BNI, if I get a recommendation from somebody who's in BNI, I know that typically they're going to refer me to somebody who's in their BNI network. If you're not familiar with that, it's a group. It's a group of people who are in various different towns, and what they do is they refer business to other people in that same group. The problem is they're required to recommend people in that group, and so it's not really on the basis of this may be the best person. It's just they're in my group. So I'm a bit cynical about the BNI recommendations, but I do think it's important to ask around and just get more businesses, just see who's out there and start to add to your list. Do they know of any other website providers locally? So just look around, get more names on that list. And then searching for specialists. So look for web design for your industry. So web design for dentists, websites for cafes, looking for it. Sometimes you won't find a company who does this, but if you do find a specialist, then they're just going to have such a depth of knowledge of the issues. It's just going to make it much easier for you, and they'll have a much better understanding of your business. So then looking for local web design companies. So just looking for web designer your location, web designer Dublin, Roscommon, Boyle, web designers in Galway, whatever your location is, and putting all of those on the list. And then once you've got your long list, then you can start ruling them out to get to your short list. So where I would go is I would check their website. Does it look good on mobile? Do you like their style? Do you have a portfolio or case study? Can you find a live website that they've built? Do they have an about page that you can look at? And by the way, all of these questions, I'm going to show you where you can download the slides for this, so you can get these. So they should lead the call. So an experienced web designer will lead the call because they're used to asking people about their projects and business. So they'll ask you a lot of questions about your project and business goals. In fact, they may ask you an annoying amount of questions because they need to ask a lot to understand what's the scope of the project that we need, and then what specifically, like what's the what's the messaging, what's the marketing aspect of this? So they need to figure that part out. And so they're going to need to ask you a lot of questions. It's crucial that they understand your business, your customers' needs, and your marketing strategy. So they need to get information to do all of that. Now, the way that they'll do this sometimes is sometimes they'll have a checklist that they send to you. So they'll have a quick initial call with you, send you a checklist or a form or something, and they'll ask you to fill that out and send it back to them. And quite often they'll do that as a way of weeding out tire kickers. So people who are not serious won't bother to do that. And so that's a good way for web designers to do that. Other times they'll actually have that in front of them when they're talking to you on the phone. And so they'll be going through that. So they'll go through that with you. And it's important that they get all of that information so that they can give you a proper quote. So some questions you can ask them. How long have you been in business? What's your background in web design? Can you talk me through your design process? Do you have a particular speciality? Do you do all of the work in-house or do you outsource them? Absolutely fine if they outsource them. Just it's nice that if they're open and honest with you about these. Have you built websites for our industry before? There's that track record and industry understanding. Can you provide references? So, and then go check out those references and call them and ask them, hey, would you work with this company again? So those are all good questions to ask. Can you talk me through your design process? It doesn't really matter what their process is, so long as they have some sort of process. They typically will have a process they go through. So some questions about the project itself. Specifically, who's going to be building the website? Is there going to be a single point of contact? You definitely want a single point of contact. You don't want to be bounced back and forth between different people. What kind of time frame do you expect it to take? What do you need from me before we start? Who provides the text copy for the website? And who provides the photo and graphics for the website? Now, the thing about these is these are negotiable. And so this will depend from project to project. Sometimes they'll be providing all the text and other times they'll expect you to provide text. So who's going to provide that? And the photos and graphics, it could be that they will come on. Some web designers are actually photographers as well, and they're going to have that kind of, particularly the ones with a very strong design background, and they'll actually come on site and do photos with you. Other times will ask if did you have somebody who created your brand, your visual identity, and do you have like a style guide or something with graphics already? So who's going to provide that? That's going to be dependent on the situation. So that's going to be negotiable. So some questions about technology. The question I would ask about this is, do you build websites in a popular system like WordPress or Squarespace or Shopify or one of those? Or do you have a bespoke system in-house? The reason why I think this is important is I want them to work in something super popular because that means that you can get support elsewhere. So if they build websites in a popular system, you can get anybody to work on your website in the future. You're not locked in. If they have a bespoke system in-house that they create, that means you are locked into using their services for good until you go and get your website rebuilt elsewhere. But I don't like that lock-in. The other example is if you take a car to an independent mechanic, if you bring in a Golf or a Toyota Corolla or something like that, or something really, really popular, then it's going to be easy for them to work on it. They're going to be able to get the parts. It's just going to be really popular. It's going to be very easy. It's not going to be expensive. You can probably shop around. Whereas if you have something a little bit more rare, if you have, like, I used to have a Saab a few years ago, and I don't know if you know, but Saab, the company, went bust. And so because of that, it was really hard to get it serviced. And anytime I could find somebody who could service it and work on it, the parts were more expensive. And that's just the downside of having something that's less popular. And so that's why I think having a popular system is really important, because it means your future, there's a big ecosystem around the technology. It means, like, if you get a website built in WordPress, for example, there's around 3 million web designers who can work on WordPress. And so you're going to have no problem finding somebody later. There was a company I remember who had a really great e-commerce website, but it was built on something that was very relatively unknown system. And so in order to get support from it, there was only 2 companies in Ireland who could support it. And one of them was too busy and the other one was too expensive. And so they had to go to the UK to get support. And that was a really, really popular e-commerce website in Ireland, but they weren't able to get support for it. So I think this is really important, that you go with something that is a popular system. I'm not advocating for WordPress specifically or Squarespace or anything like that. I'm just saying that it's relatively popular and used on a lot of websites means that more people can work on it in the future. Then other questions about technology, simply how long have you been working with the technology that you'll use on our website? You want them to have been working with it for a little bit so that they actually know how to build websites in it. And then have you got experience building using any other systems? And you also do want that, because you want them to have tried a few different things and learned, so that, again, that you're not their learning curve. So questions about pricing. How do you structure your pricing? So 50-50 is very common. So 50% deposit, 50% before go live. You'll see on larger projects, it might be 40-30-30. And then if the web designer is very much in demand, you might even see 100% upfront. And then other people might offer a discount for 100% upfront in terms of pricing. So that's all completely negotiable, and it's going to depend on the designer. What future and ongoing costs are they going to be? So this is just so you're aware of anything that might come up. So you're aware well in advance of what that might be. And then are there any third-party costs like software licenses and things like that that we might need to pay? So that's just to check what else there might be. Who has ownership of the website? So copyright. So this is typically negotiable as well. But the way that this works normally is they will assign copyright ownership to you on receipt of the final payment. That's really normal. Now, what they can say is what might happen is they say, look, we can give you what we created for you, but we can't give you copyright ownership for things that we don't own. So let's say you go into Harvey Norman and you buy a laptop. You own that laptop, but you don't own the rights to resell Microsoft Windows, for example. So in the same way, they can't give you ownership of the underlying systems. They can give you ownership of the things that they've created for you in terms of the website. And then the other thing is just trust your gut with this. So don't ignore red flags. If you get a red flag when you're on a call with a web designer, don't ignore it. Just strike them off the list. The issue here is you could be working with this company. At the very least, you're going to be working with them for 3 to 6 months while you get the website built. And you could be working with them for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. I'm still working with clients who I started working with in 2007, 2008. And so you could be working with these people for a long time. So just bear in mind, it's a relationship. It's not a transaction. You're not buying a bar of chocolate. You're going to have to work with this person or these people and get their help. And you don't want to ignore any red flags, warning flags that you get about this. Because, if you get a warning flag about the communication, or, they start getting angry when you ask questions, or, that's going to be there in the future as well. So don't ignore that. It's life's too short for that kind of thing. So trust your gut when it comes to this. Okay, folks, any questions on anything that we've done so far? Okay, I'm going to show you. We're going to do something on search and social traffic. I'm going to show you where you can find this whiteboard image, actually. And I'm also going to show you where you can get the slides. So if you go to training.websitedoctor.com, I'm just going to put that link in the chat. If you go there, you'll see this very cheesy picture of a younger me. And you'll see on this, there's some drop down. These are notes from when I do in-person training courses. I just kind of put together pages of notes based on that, rather than giving out stacks of printouts. I like to put it online. So that's what this is. You feel free to poke around there. If you're interested in any of those topics, there's one on podcasting for people who are into that. There's one on content marketing and website planning and things like that. So feel free to poke around in there. I see that those are still loading for some reason. Okay, that's not what we want to see. So that's probably, there we go. Okay, so this one, so if you go to training notes online sales, you'll see that whiteboard image, and you'll also see these slides here, or slides links. So the TOVS, the Leo version, there is an Údarás to Gaeltacht version for people in the Údarás areas, in Gaeltacht areas. But this is the one that we just went through, the Leo version. There's also the website basics, and also how to choose, find and choose a web design company. So they're all linked to on there. I've also got links to a whole bunch of other things. So for example, GT metrics and web page test, those are tools for checking website speed. So let's say, for example, I'll just put in website doctor.com, and that's going to just do a test there on that. And here's another one. I'll test this one. I'll check out my other website, the recognized authority.com, and test it from Germany because it's based in Ireland. So right, so you can see this one is doing a test here. Oh, this one this one is forcing me to register to see my report. I don't want to register to see the report, so let's just look at this one. Oh, and this one is waiting behind 800 other tests. Okay, so I wasn't expecting those because usually these are quicker. This one looks like there's I wonder why that's why such a delay. I'm gonna log in here because I use this tool a lot. So I'm gonna log in and see, does it let me do that. So what you can do is you can put your website address in here. And so nope, that's not what we're gonna test. Test that. And okay, I'm gonna pick Virginia in the US, and let's see. Hopefully there will be less ahead of us this time. Okay, so test started. Cool. So maybe that's because I'm logged in, or maybe that's I don't have a login for GT metrics. I must get one of those at some point. So I just want to show you what this looks like, what the output of this looks like, just so you see. Okay. So when you're testing your website, I'm not expecting you to understand what all of these things mean. I just want you to know roughly what it looks like, and that your web designer should be able to interpret all this. So it's giving me a bunch of different numbers here that all mean different things. The time to first byte, this is how long is the delay before the first piece of information, and it's 0.7 seconds, which is okay, not brilliant. Then it's got start render. So how long does it take before something starts to happen on the screen? And it's 1.2 seconds. I'm happy with that. That means that if somebody clicks on Google, they're staring at a blank white page for around 1.2 seconds. And then largest contentful paint. So when does most of the stuff start to appear? And it's saying around 1.78 seconds. So under 2 seconds. And you can actually see this little visual loading. You can see where things start to appear around the 1.5 to 2 second mark. So I'm happy with that. And then this is the cool thing for techie people, is we can click through and it will actually show us a waterfall flow of when stuff happens and why. And so what we can do is we can click on these and see. So for example, I can click on this one and I can see when it started to load, how long it took, but it will actually show me. So there, that's my book cover. So so I can see, okay, that book cover, I can see that loading here and it's telling me details. And that's the cool thing. I'm not expecting you to be able to interpret all this. Just know that your web designer has these tools available and they should be able to test your website. And if something is taking super long, they can come in and they can say, okay, here's something we need to work on. So I can see, for example, this photograph here of me. I can see how long it takes and say, okay, well, maybe we need to compress this file more if it needs to be compressed more. In this case, it doesn't. But if it did, it would tell us, it would flag that to us. So that is website speed and testing it. And those are some of the tools that you can use here. They're mentioned on this page here. Okay. And then feel free to click around. There's a few different things on there that might be useful for you. Some books, there's the Don't Make Me Think, the link to that. There's some other resources and things like that. I do recommend, if you're thinking about content marketing, so that is the idea of creating a podcast, blogging, creating a YouTube channel, anything like that, then I would say watch this video with this guy, Joe Paluzzi. It's a really it's a 45-minute presentation with about the concept of content marketing. And these slides here I actually pulled off of his off that video, but that is really good if you're thinking about doing something like that. And feel free to just poke around on this website and look at anything you want to on there. It's all public. Okay, so back to here. So this is the final part for today's presentation or today's training. And this is, where do we get our traffic from for our website when our website goes live? And the issue here is we've created this shiny new website and now nobody is visiting. So how do we get people, ideally in our target market, to come and visit our website? And so I'm just talking about the online source of traffic here now. I'm not talking about, you know, if you put up a billboard beside the N5 or if you go on drive time radio or you get on the Late Late Show or something like that. I'm just talking about online sources. And typically the online sources are going to be divided in two. And one is search engines and the other is social media. And search traffic and social traffic are very different. And that's the main thing to understand. And it's all about mindset. And so the issue here is people who are searching for something are in hunting mode. So they are looking for something very specific. They want to achieve something. They want to achieve a goal or find a piece of information. So they are searching. They're in this hunting mode. People who are on social media are in a totally different mindset. They're in this browsing mode where they are walking down Grafton Street, looking in the windows, not looking to buy anything particular. They are in a totally different mindset. And so what that means is that people who come to your website from search, all you need to do is, first of all, you need to get your offer in front of them if it's the thing that they're looking for, and then just get the hell out of the way. Just make it easy for them to buy it, put it up at a price that they consider to be reasonable, and make it easy for them to buy it, look trustworthy, tick all the boxes in terms of trust, and just make it easy for them to find it. And if you can get those people to your website, then the odds are decent that they're going to buy it. People come from social in totally different mindset. They're just browsing. And so in order to get them to even visit your website, you've got to pique their interest. And in order to pique their interest, you've got to do a pattern interrupt usually of some type. You've got to put up something that grabs their attention in some way. And so to do that, you've got to usually post something on one of the social media where your target market hang out. I mentioned at the very start that I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and much less so than all of the other social medias. Back when I made this graphic, Facebook was by far the dominant, and Twitter was much more dominant than it is now. TikTok didn't exist when I made this graphic. So Facebook would be smaller for me here. TikTok would be on here somewhere, but yet still all of the social media, it doesn't really matter which one of those is your primary, so long as it's a platform that you're happy to be on. Because, for example, some people might say, well, you know, CEOs mostly hang out on LinkedIn. And it's true. A lot of CEOs are more likely to be found on LinkedIn than on TikTok, for example. But if you are a TikTok native and you're happy with your use of that platform, then you will eventually be able to find the people that you're looking for, even if they're CEOs, because there's so many people on all of those huge social networks that there's bound to be some of your type of people on there. But so what I would say is focus on a social network that you are most comfortable with. And because you're most comfortable with it, you'll probably be better at using it than if you try and force yourself to go elsewhere. Now, the way that I like to think about these things is I like to think about having a primary and a secondary. Now, it's okay to go get your profile and set up your profile on all of the networks. That's absolutely fine. But it's very hard to divide your attention between all of the different networks. And so I would suggest that you have a primary network that you choose and a secondary. And so for me, the primary is LinkedIn. And the secondary previously would have been Twitter, but now it's more Instagram. So primary for me is Instagram, secondary is primary is LinkedIn, secondary is Instagram. And so I do have a presence on other places, but I'm not as active on there. So for example, I do use Facebook, but not so much. I log into Facebook maybe once a week or so that I check it out. I do still live stream to Facebook because I have the ability to do that with the tools that I use, but it's not something that I really keep much of an eye on. I'm much more active and I'm logging in every single day onto LinkedIn because that's my primary network. And then I'm sometimes on Instagram. I post a lot of stuff onto Instagram, but it's more broadcast, whereas LinkedIn is where I interact the most. So what I suggest is you have a primary and a secondary and focus on those. You'll notice on both sides of this equation, I have free and paid because both of these have free and paid options. And so, for example, the free or ostensibly free version of search is typically search engine optimization. And then you've got paid search, which is Google AdWords and things like that. The issue over here is that free, particularly when it comes to Google, isn't actually really free anymore because you have to put in so much effort and invest a lot of time and potentially money as well into ranking for that. And then the paid stuff is expensive but can work really well because, again, the people who are searching are people who are in that hunting mode. And that's why paid search on Google is more expensive typically than paid ads on Facebook. Then, so over here on this side of the equation, your free organic social posts, they're going to work really well on some platforms. So for example, on LinkedIn, you can write a free post and a lot of people will see that. But if you write a free post and don't boost it or don't pay for ads or anything on Facebook, then very few people who follow your page are actually going to see it. I think I saw stats like something like less than 2% of your audience of people who follow you will see a social post if you write it and you don't boost it. So that's tough. You're going to have more people are going to see it over on LinkedIn. So it's going to depend on which way you want to go. There are lots of different options here, but this is like these are the primary sources for that. Then you're sending all of this traffic to your website or your offer. So what can you do to improve that? And so what I mean by improving that are, can we make it faster? Can we make the offer better? Like, can we add more descriptions to the product? Can we add more photos or can we add reviews? Can we reduce the price? Can we make the page load faster? Can we make the design look better? Can we make it more mobile friendly? All of these are different things that you can do to improve the offer. And with the goal of most people are going to leave, how can we get more people to move from the leave option over to buying and inquiring? And the other option then is let's make some other option like email subscription or this other thing called remarketing. So we want to stop people from leaving. And if they're not ready to buy right now, what can we do? Well, we can see, can we get them to subscribe to our email list at least so that we can continue to contact them? Or we can remarket, which is where we say, hey, Facebook, show this ad to people who visited this page on our website. And so remarketing is sometimes called retargeting. It's the same thing. And that's where you show ads to people on social media who have visited a particular page on your website. Now, you just have to be careful with that because it can seem like you're stalking people. So you need to be careful with how you do that. But that's another way, because what you're trying to do here is you're trying to move people away from just outright leaving your website over into taking some other action. So that's how I think about this. Where are you going to get your traffic from? And that's kind of like a more strategic thing of, well, I'm going to look at social networks. So I'm going to start building out an audience on LinkedIn, for example, by posting regularly on there. Or we're going to do a paid campaign with Google AdWords, or we're going to make a YouTube channel, or whatever the option is that you're going to take for that. And then that's going to bring people to our website. And then how are we going to improve that website, or how are we going to improve that offer? We're going to make the design better. We're going to make it faster. We're going to, we're going to optimize it. Maybe we're going to change the offer so that it becomes a subscription instead of a big upfront ticket, high ticket price. There could be something like that. So what can you do to improve that offer? So that is online sales, how to get people to, how to get traffic, how to get people to your website. So what questions do you have based for me on that? Or anything that we've done, because we've come to the end of the kind of the formal part of the presentation. So I'm available to answer your questions. So please just ask me questions on anything that we've done so far. Okay, cool. It looks like we don't have questions. So the recording of this will be going out to Jeremy. It won't go out straight away. It takes a while for Zoom to process it. But I'll be sending that on to Jeremy later on this afternoon. So he'll probably have it for you maybe tomorrow. And if you do have any questions, feel free to follow up with me. I'll give you my email address. So if you have any technical questions, feel free to email me, amd@websitedoctor.com. And if you have any website questions, and when you get your websites built, I'd love to see them, because I always love seeing websites from people who were on these calls. Then the other thing is, I am super active on LinkedIn, like I mentioned. So please do connect with me on there, and on any of the other social medias, but particularly on LinkedIn. So yeah, that's my profile on LinkedIn. And yeah, I post a lot about building authority through content, through podcasting and things like that. So I do a lot of live streams as well. So yeah, if you're into into podcasting or creating online video, that's something that's very important for me. That's why I put a lot of effort into my video and my audio quality, because I think those are really important. And in fact, there is science behind why those are really important. But yeah, feel free to reach out, and yeah, best luck with the project. Any other questions for anybody before I finish up?
No, just say thanks very much for that. Appreciate that.
Awesome.
Nice.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, folks. Have a good day.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye.